how do you prepare? Forget about the COVID stuff. How do you practice? How do you do anything in these circumstances? What's been going on from that perspective?
Yeah, that's what I don't get. Is how are they even practicing?
Thanks for hopping aboard Birds 365 on the JAKIB YouTube channel. You got the Mac eyes, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. We know the Eagles have the big showdown with the Washington football team coming up on Sunday. Here to give us a DC perspective. He gets it every single day on 106.7 The Fan down in DC. Usually I talk baseball with him when I get the chance because he's also on Sirius XM's MLB Network Radio, but he does skins all week long. Oh, wait, I can't say that. Again, I apologize. Jody McDonald and John McMullen talking to Graham Paulsen of 106.7 The Fan down in D.C. How you been, GP?
I'm good, Jody Mac. John, how are you guys?
Doing well. Thanks for joining the program, Grant. I guess we got to start with the obvious situation going down inside the Beltway. 18, I believe, is the number currently on the COVID-19 list for the Washington football team. What the heck can Ron Rivera do? I mean, what can you do in this? Is it just the hope that the NFL changes as there's late sort of stage negotiations to change the policy to maybe one negative test for vaccinated players? Is that pretty much all you can do at this stage?
Yeah, so there's a couple things they're hoping for. I mean, the first is a bit of a Hail Mary, I think, which is last year they pushed a few games back a day or two to try to help some teams get some players out of the protocol. They were very flexible in 2020. They've been pretty rigid about doing that in 2021. The league has made it pretty clear they want nothing to do with moving games. That's not to say they would cancel it or postpone it. There's a lot of money on the line with the TV networks, and obviously these games are critical for the playoffs, but it would be played perhaps on Monday or Tuesday. I think there was some hope in the building that could happen if they can't get some of these players off of this COVID list. You're right. The number's 18. The problem with that is that it's just not going to happen based on what they're hearing from the league. So then you go to plan B for them, which is, as you said, and it's not just Washington, right? It's the Rams, it's the Browns. And most teams are affected in some way by one or two players who are dealing with COVID. But the Players Association, the union, and the league are talking right now as we speak and have been since yesterday with Alan Sills and all of his medical staffers and the medical team that's involved in these decisions about changing and tweaking some of the rules that would allow for vaccinated, asymptomatic players to get out of the protocol easier and quicker than they are. I saw a number this week, fellas, where it was something like only 20% of the players who are vaccinated and asymptomatic were getting out of the protocol within, the 5 or 6 days. So if you test early in the week that you could play on Sunday. And I think originally the whole point was they were making it really tough on unvaccinated guys so that they got vaccinated, obviously. But what has happened is, while we thought, well, if you're vaccinated and you're asymptomatic, you'll get out of the protocol pretty quickly. You'll test negative a couple times. It just hasn't happened like they thought. So maybe you'll end up only needing one negative test to get out of the protocol, something like that.
Right, but you think it's more likely that it'll be at least one test. Right now it's 2 tests, 24 hours in between, and you can be reinstated. You think they'll do it in steps, cut back to 1 test before they say, hey, if you're asymptomatic, we'll let you play immediately. You don't even go into the protocols.
I suppose that they could make that leap. I mean, that'd be a pretty big leap for them just based on how conservative perhaps that they've been along the way for obvious and probably good reason. But that's possible. But I think it would just go from 2 tests to 1. And maybe one of the things I heard from, someone who's tied to some players in the league was that perhaps they could do something where they test players less frequently who are vaccinated. I mean, these guys are still tested all the time. Perhaps unless you have symptoms, if you're vaccinated, how often you get tested could lessen. So there's a couple of balls in the air that they're spinning here. The big question, I do believe they're going to come to this change and this conclusion that we're all thinking is possible at some point in the maybe it's today, maybe it's tomorrow, whatever. Do they affect games this weekend, though? I mean, that's the question, right? Can they get this done in a matter of time where Washington, the Rams, who are destroyed, the Browns, who have 18 players, and the coach on the COVID list, including their quarterback, Baker Mayfield. Like, are those teams going to benefit from these changes on Sunday? I mean, in the Browns case, they play Saturday. So that I'm starting to wonder about, because it's now Friday. It's now Thursday, and tomorrow you're going to wake up and you're a day away from your game on Friday.
And Grant, obviously, it's the time of year where these games are very important for teams. And obviously, you look at the Eagles and Washington football team at both at 6 and 7. Technically, Washington would be that last seed today, but this game will have a large bearing. If you look at some of these predictive sites, 538, New York Times, the winner of this game kind of spikes to 50+%. The loser down to 10, 11, 12%. What do you think from the league's perspective when they look at competitive advantage, competitive disadvantage in a situation like that? Is it just tough luck? Do they enter that into the equation?
It seems like they're so far, and they are, to their credit, they're talking with the PA as we're saying, but yeah, they kind of view it as sorry about it. Teams are without guys who tear their ACL or rupture an Achilles or have some type of shoulder problem, and it's next man up, and you just got to figure it out. Now, it's one thing if you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 players on COVID, but when you can't field a position group, I mean, just so Eagles fans know, like Washington's defensive line, which has been the strength of the team for a while, and you guys saw it in week 1 last year when they had 7 sacks and took over the game to beat the Eagles. This they're all gone. I mean, there's nobody left. Quite literally, they have 4 defensive ends and 3 defensive tackles in the COVID protocol that may not be able to play. In a position group where you have 8 guys at most, they've got 7 on this list. Now, I do think that in general, the league cares about, if they can trace things, how this started. Were teams following the rules? Were players vaccinated? Did you do all you can do? That's pretty clear dating back to last year. If you remember, they forced the Broncos to play a game without any quarterbacks. And everyone always references that as, well, they don't care. Well, that's not quite true. I had Peter King on my show this week, and he kind of drew a line in the sand where he said the league investigated that, and they found that the Broncos quarterback room kind of nefariously tried to skirt the rules, where they weren't wearing their monitors. They were taking them off. They weren't doing what they were supposed to do, and they tried to cover it up. And so when they found that out, according to Peter King, they basically said, well, you guys can kick rocks, play the game without a quarterback. When there have been other cases, you go back to like the Ravens had a game last year where they had an outbreak. They moved the game from Sunday to early in the week and then moved it again all the way to Wednesday. And the Steelers felt like they were getting screwed because they had to keep sitting around and waiting. But I think what the league found was, well, this team did everything that we told them to do, and they're just in a bad spot. Washington only had, to my knowledge, I believe it was 6 unvaccinated players in their whole building. Now, most of those guys, the majority of them, I should say, were either on the list or are still on the list in this outbreak. But having said that, the vast majority of these 18 players did what the league wanted. They got vaccinated. And while I guess we're not around them all the time, so I can't tell you as gospel that they've done everything they were supposed to do with distancing and masks and all this stuff, the league has not punished anybody. The league has not said that they didn't do anything. There's no pictures of them partying. So I don't know how they can just assume that they were up to no good. So if they got vaccinated, the league wanted you to, and they followed your rules, it's hard for me to imagine that the league's just going to sit back and go, sorry, guys, your season's on the line on Sunday, and there's nothing we can do to help you. But again, it's not just Washington. It's the Rams dealing with this. They're playing a massive game, a game back in the West, and the Browns have a chance to win their division and don't have a quarterback or a coach. And the league right now has said you're playing on Saturday. So it's unbelievable. It really is.
If we were playing this game on the schoolyard on Saturday, and you got to finish up the game, so if the other team has issues, you lend them one of yours. We give you Ryan Kerrigan back if you wanted him, because done a lot for the Eagles, but that unfortunately is not going to be what happens. But you read, on top of everything else, Washington has injury issues. I'm not even talking COVID. Yes, I understand their quarterback took full participation yesterday in practice, but you're going to tell us exactly how close to 100% Taylor Heineke is. They've got a couple of key players with concussion issues and all that. It'd be one thing if they just had all these COVID issues. They've got injury issues on top of it, Grant. give us the update on McLaurin and Heineke going into the game.
Yeah, take COVID out of the equation for a second. They're pillaged by injuries. I mean, they really are. Like, to the point where last week they got beat by Dallas 27-20. And just so people that didn't see the game know, it was not that close. They were down 24-0 at the half. They were down 18-0 after one quarter. And to their credit, they play hard under Ron Rivera. They scratched and clawed. They had a pick six defensively. Dak played a pretty bad game. And they ended up having the ball down 27-20 with a couple minutes to go. So it seems like it was close. But when you look back at the game, they got worked. It wasn't close. But I think a lot of it was they just didn't have enough horses. And that was before the COVID outbreak. So to quickly run through it, you mentioned quarterback Taylor Heineke. He will play. They have to have him play at this point because their backup, who finished the game when Heineke got hurt last week, Kyle Allen, is in the COVID protocol. So he's not available for Sunday as of right now anyway.
So, if you don't mind me interrupting, if that's the case and Allen isn't good to go, who's the backup right now to Heineke?
So they would pull Kyle Shermer off the practice squad, who nobody in D.C. could recognize if you paid them to pick him out of a lineup.
Pat Shermer's kid.
Yeah, Pat Shermer's son. Kid. Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's on their practice squad. They just signed Jordan Ta'amu, who was an XFL quarterback with the St. Louis Battlehawks.
St. Louis Battlehawks star.
That's right. He started over Heineke in the XFL, actually. They just signed him yesterday, I believe, to their practice squad. So that's the quarterback room at this point. Maybe they'll quarantine one of those guys to make sure that at least someone with a heartbeat is eligible and available come Sunday. I'm not really sure what the plan there is. But Heineke got hurt two different times in the game. He hurt his elbow and he hurt his knee. So when he hurt his knee, his elbow, he kind of stayed in the game and came back in the game. He hurt his knee at the end. He didn't come back in. But he says right now the elbow is the bigger issue, although he says there's no pain when he threw at practice. So figure that out. So Heineke's going to play. They're hoping to get J.D. McKissick back, who's important to them. He's their check down, safety valve, pass-catching running back. He's like top two among running back catches since the beginning of last year. He had 80 catches in 2020. Terry McLaurin's the best player on their offense. He went up high for an underthrown pass last week, got undercut, landed on his head, has a concussion. He's in the concussion protocol. No word if he's going to play or not. He was not able to go full in practice yesterday. Their wide receiver, two, is Curtis Samuel, who's played like 4 games all year and has done nothing. He's had this groin injury that has lasted for months and months and months. And now he's got a hamstring injury, so he was back on the side field yesterday. So if he does play, he'll play a tiny role, and we're not sure if he'll play at all. They have a wide receiver who stepped up last week named Cam Sims, who caught a 43-yard touchdown. He is also in the COVID protocol, probably not going to be available as of right now. They have their best tight end, Logan Thomas, is out for the year with a torn ACL. So they've got a tight end who's come on, and John Bates, who is, as of right now, their only tight end left standing because they have put 2 tight ends in the COVID protocol. Their starting right tackle, Cornelius Lucas, is one of the 18 guys in the COVID protocol. They're without their starting center, Chase Roulier. They're actually down to their 4th center now. Not just because of injuries, one's in the COVID protocol, but they lost their 3rd center to a torn Achilles last week against the Cowboys.
So
go ahead.
Other than that,
how's the play, Mrs. Lincoln?
Which is funny because we got a chance to have our 10-minute talk with Ron Rivera yesterday, and that was my first question to him was, how do you prepare? Forget about the COVID stuff. How do you practice? How do you do anything in these circumstances? What's been going on from that perspective?
Yeah, that's what I don't get. Is how are they even practicing? I remember, Jody, you'll remember this. The alternate sites for baseball before the season when they were doing the COVID year, like there were teams because of just how the rosters were constructed, where if a guy got called up or someone got COVID, they didn't have like a full 9 to field all the positions. It was like a Sandlot bit. So they would quite literally have like a trainer stand in left field and play left for these like major league level simulated games. I have to imagine it looks something like that right now, where they've just got like random people standing at positions or, maybe are going through the motions in practice without players at every spot. Because, we went through, in a funny way, like the long-winded injury report a second ago. We didn't get to the defense, which is the one that's hurt by COVID. Like those were the injuries. They don't have a defensive line. They've got multiple linebackers on COVID. They've got 2 corners on COVID, including their best corner, and a safety. So I don't really know, to answer your question, John. Yesterday they had a practice. They didn't do anything indoors. All their meetings are Zoom and virtual, but they feel good about being able to go outdoors, put a mask on, and go through this workout. But I have no idea what they were able to accomplish. How could you?
I was only half kidding when I said, well, we'll lend you Ryan Kerrigan if you need him back for practice purposes, because, Ron Rivera is dealing with unprecedented shortcomings getting ready for this game this week. All right, the Eagles were on the bye last week. So as soon as the game is over against the Jets, you start to think about the next Eagle game, which we knew was almost 2 weeks down the road, but it's going to be against Washington. And I'm trying to figure out, what does Washington bring to the table, give the Eagles some troubles. And the first thing jumped to mind was Antonio Gibson, because he's had a nice season. I think he's one of the more underrated backs in the National Football League. Didn't do much last week against Dallas. Eagles didn't have a game to analyze. We do have a Washington game, and the Cowboys, A, shut them down, B, had a big lead, so it kind of took the running game away from Washington a little bit. They're going to start 0-0 on Sunday with all the injuries to the wide receivers that the Washington football team has right now. Is it going to be Antonio Gibson left, Antonio Gibson right, and Antonio Gibson up the middle?
So in their 4-game winning streak, basically that was the formula, right? Was they were giving him 20-plus carries, and they were dominating time of possession. If you go back and look at that winning streak, I mean, there were a couple games where they flirted with 40 minutes to 20 minutes against their opponent. They are not skilled enough on offense. They're undermanned, as we've talked about, but they lack big play potential in a chunk yardage league, right? They don't have the ability to go score a touchdown on a 2-play 82-yard drive or something. It's just not they don't have that club in the bag. So what they have to do is they have to go on these 12 and 13 play drives where they stay ahead of the sticks. It's a tough way to live, and it's a hard margin. I mean, I'm sure the Eagles in some way can relate to this a little bit as a running team. But you guys know this. Like, it takes a holding penalty, and you're screwed. It takes a sack, and now it's second and obvious passing, and you're in a bad spot. For that month, everything came up them. They would get 3 on first down. They would get 2 on second down. It's 3rd and 5. Heineke would scramble for 6, or he'd throw a ball to Adam Humphries to make a sliding catch for 8. And they would go on these long drives, and they would keep the football. And quite literally, at the end of the game, they'd have 37 minutes TOP, and it worked. It's just not an easy thing to replicate. It's not really sustainable. But I guess to answer your question, Jody, that is what they have to do. It doesn't have to just be Gibson. They've got Jarrett Patterson. They've got a guy named Jonathan Williams, who they called off their practice squad last week, who scored a touchdown. They could try to diversify the backfield and give all those guys touches if they wanted to. But I think particularly with a banged-up Heineke, if you don't have McLaurin, down a couple tight ends, it's going to have to be a successful rushing attack, and they don't really have any other options. I mean, if they're not able to run the ball, and I'm not a big run the ball, 50 times. I think the way to score points in this league is to throw it. They scored 17 points in back-to-back wins as a run-first team against the Seahawks and the Raiders. They were winning because of their defense, really. But the formula is keep that defense fresh and run it, and that's their one shot at this thing, I'd say.
Grant, so we've gone down the COVID issues, we've gone down the injury issues. This organization also has Daniel Snyder issues, and it always seems to pop up, and that came up with the Washington Post again, and Will Hobson and Liz Clark with another sort of investigative report about Daniel trying to meddle in the investigation into the Washington football team. Curious as to how did that get buried because of all the COVID issues? Does Ron have to deal with that kind of stuff? Does that kind of enter into the thought process with the reporters that cover the team on a daily basis, or is it just white noise at this point because Daniel Snyder's Daniel Snyder?
It's kind of the last one, honestly. I mean, so fans care a little bit. I'd say in the media, we care more, it seems like. But there are certainly fans that are obsessed with anything Snyder related that they think could be in some way damaging to him or could get him out of Washington, because kind of universally, everybody thinks that he's done a bad job and he's not a particularly good person, and he doesn't have a lot of fans here. But Rivera is really good at distancing himself from this and kind of just playing the I'm a football coach card. Now he's also the president of the operation, and so without the title, he's a de facto general manager. That said, he deals with the football and he kind of dismisses everything else, as he should. I mean, this is not his cross to bear. A lot of this happened before he got here. He shouldn't have to answer for Dan Snyder. And Dan Snyder never talks. He's never seen, never heard from. So that, that helps Rivera, I think, in some way, in the sense that you don't have to ask him, and Dan's not out there talking to kind of create more content. But specific to the report, while it wasn't surprising at all, the Washington Post kind of has details that we've all assumed were happening and was the case, which is to say that Snyder was meddling, was trying to interfere, was trying, not himself, like knocking on doors, but he had people going and talking to folks with information, allegedly, to say, hey, don't help in this investigation or whatever. But there were some amazing nuggets that came out of that story.
The text message was unbelievable.
The text message thing. Like, have you ever heard anything so petty? So Bruce Allen was the president of the Washington football team for a decade, and he did a horrendous job. He was Dan Snyder's best buddy for many, many years, drinking buddy and right-hand man. And they have had just a nasty breakup. I mean, an absolute, we're fighting over who gets custody and the dog. I mean, they are in such a bad way right now with their relationship. But the amazing thing in this story was that when Ron Rivera was hired, Bruce Allen apparently texted Ron Rivera. Everyone in the league knows each other. Yeah. And congratulated him and said, hey, Ron, just wanted to say congrats on the head coaching gig. Well, Dan Snyder found that out, but Dan never got a text from Bruce, so he had just fired, to say congratulations on hiring Ron Rivera. And that really upset Dan. And so Dan asked someone to get Bruce to text him a congratulations, and Bruce didn't do it. So weeks later, I guess, when they're in this fight over how much money they're going to give Bruce during the pandemic, or if they have to give him the whole contract, one of the things they agreed upon was that Dan's people said they would pay Bruce all of his money, but he had to text Dan, congratulations, hiring Ron Rivera. And the best part about this was 7 months after Rivera was hired. So 7 months later, he's telling him, this is through his people and Bruce's people, the text I want you to send me is this. As if that would mean anything when you just get a text you wrote for yourself. By the way, Bruce apparently never sent the text, which is also funny.
And it's so funny because I was going there and it just organically, the conversation went there. Does anyone know where Bruce Allen is? Not only is he a big deal with this Washington thing, we go all the way back to Gruden and the emails. And nobody's ever really gotten Bruce Allen on the record to talk about any of this. Did he sign a non-disclosure? Is he in Alaska hunting bears? Where exactly is Mr. Allen these days?
So I believe he's in California. That's where he lives. He has like an $8 million home, if I remember correctly, that he had in California somewhere. He's got kids. He's got a wife. So presumably he's laying low and doing the family thing. To answer your question, I'm sure. Look, I know people have reached out and tried to get him to talk. I don't know about the NDA. I would say that a lot of people that leave that building sign some type of document that says they're not going to throw stones publicly. Yep. But him and Dan Snyder are also in a legal fight, right? I mean, his name's come up in these lawsuits, and Dan has alleged that some of the former owners or former employees, and I think Bruce could be involved, has been involved in leaking sometimes fake information about him. I mean, they're in this massive fight. So even if he wanted to talk, I'm not sure legally right now what he can and can't say. But yeah, I think geographically speaking, I believe he is in California.
Gotcha.
Well, Grant, I'm trying to get something positive for the Washington football team. And maybe it's apropos that you guys are inside the Beltway and politics, and everything in Washington, D.C. these days seems to be a mess from that perspective. But the one shining light to me with the Washington football team is Ron Rivera. Just a great guy. What has he meant for that organization, especially getting through what's been a difficult era, this sort of past few years with Daniel Snyder and the investigation and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think it's been a great benefit to have him, obviously, as the captain of the ship during all of this. because he is an asset to the organization. He's a good human being, but I think even more importantly, he's got this sterling reputation and everyone around the league loves him. And that's not to say it's not deserved, but I mean, nationally, like his name comes up and there are positive feelings and people like him. And so it's for them, it's awesome because they haven't had that in so long, right? Not to knock Jay Gruden, who I really, really liked, but people either didn't know much about him. No one, like when Jay Gruden's name came up, you don't have a national TV person just singing the praises of what a great person he is because they don't have the relationship with him. Rivera's got relationships, it seems like, with every single person in the NFL. And so I think that's just been huge for them. Last year, as an example, when some things were coming off the rails and weren't going well, you had the Alex Smith story where he's coming back and he's kind of like a hero in the NFL. And you had Ron Rivera, and it was like suddenly they'd become one of the most likable teams in the league, which we haven't experienced here in a long time. So just having him around in that regard, because people are going to say some nice things, or they're not going to take the same pot shots or make fun of you like they might because they like Rivera. Like that's been a benefit. And then specifically in the building, I think he is a leader of men. I think he's, he was a player. Obviously, 85 Bears, was a good linebacker in the league. So guys, he takes care of his players. They respect that. They like that. I think they play really, really hard for him and they like him. He's done a good job this year. I really believe that as a head coach. We're going to have to separate as we analyze Ron, the GM, and the head coach, because he's never really been a GM. And I've got major questions about some of the things they've done with personnel. And maybe that's an area where you critique him a little bit harder. But as a coach, I think this year he's been fantastic. And as just a leader of men in the building in a time of turmoil, he's a really good fit. Because they needed someone to steady this thing, and he's been able to.
Grant, last question, and I enjoy asking this question to guys. When we have beat guys on who cover the team day in and day out, want to give them a chance to chime in about what they think is going to happen coming up. It's a very open-ended question. Feel free to answer it as honestly or as biasedly as you see fit, but just give us the background to it. The Washington football team will beat the Philadelphia Eagles Sunday because fill in the blank. Either give us the straight scoop or say, yeah, hold on, let me put my Washington football team blinkers on.
They get most of the players in the COVID protocol back because the league changes a rule. And they use it as some type of like rallying cry where it's motivational, where, all right, we were left for dead. They probably spent the week thinking they were going to roll us. Let's go out and make them pay for that kind of thing. I think for the record, guys, that's unrealistic. I think they might get a few guys back. Maybe even one of their, like John Allen's their best player on defense. He's going to a Pro Bowl. He's had a fringe all pro caliber season in the middle, like a Fletcher Cox type impact. Yep. Here's the problem. He's in the protocol. Now, maybe they get him back and one or two other guys. But I still think they're going to be without double-digit players, and that's just that plus the injuries will be too much to overcome, like an insurmountable deficit. But I would say the direct answer is if you're telling me they win, the script will have been they got a lot of guys back, they ran the ball well, and they somehow managed like a 17-14 slog fest where I don't know what the weather looks like, but maybe there's rain that no one's forecasting that comes, and both teams fumble 13 times.
We tapped into his Washington football team expertise. You can do so every day on 106.7 The Fan down in D.C. Weekends, you can catch him on Sirius XM MLB Network talking baseball. I just like talking to the dude because he knows what the hell he's talking about. GP, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for coming on, buddy. We'll talk to you again down the road.
You're the best, Jody Mack. John, good talking with you, brother. Be well. Great job, guys.
Thanks,
There
Grant.
is
Appreciate
Jim
it.
Paulsen from 106.7 The Fan. Honest guy. He said, yeah, if all the guys, a good percentage of the guys come back off the 18 list as of right now. And I asked John about that earlier, and he said, Joe, I can only go by the numbers I'm going by right now. None of us know how many are going to be able to get off the protocol list. None of us know if Roger Goodell's not going to have an announcement in the next 20 minutes. Listen, we're redoing our COVID protocol. None of us know that. Could happen. Probably not. And that's why.
And Grant mentioned 20, and he's right, about 20% if you go through the season, guys, vaccinated guys, forget unvaccinated guys, they're out for 10 days. 20% in a week get back for the particular game. So 1 in 5, do the math. Not a lot of them are going to make it back. And that's what I was saying earlier in the show.
It's going to be difficult they'll field the team. They'll get enough guys on the practice. If they got to sign guys off the street to put on the practice squad, they'll have 8 for Sunday. They'll have 53 dressed. Will they be good enough to play and compete against the Eagles? That's a bit of a stretch. All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald, your Mac Birds 365 guys. We got to put a bow on the show. Only a couple of minutes left. Stay right here with us.